Hello, my name is William Godwin, and this is an extract from Lottie Lyons' Rookie Reporter, a novel written by the journalist Sophia Stewart, which is now available on Amazon. You will hear 5 voices in this short promo, including the authors, so look out for the credit screen at the end for their names. The story opens in America in 1935. Lottie Lyons, a young person from California, wants more than anything to become a newspaper reporter in New York City. She takes the cross-country train to Grand Central Station, carrying just one bag and a baby blue Underwood typewriter. Our extract today is from a little way into the book, chapter 5 to be precise. Lottie has found a place to live on the Upper West Side with some fun roommates called Emily Davies and Marla Tennant. She's been doing some freelance pieces for both the mid-market women's magazine K and the fashion brand Mode. But now, after a chance meeting with the editor of Manhattan Dispatch, she's scored a tryout on a daily newspaper. This is her first day there. Right. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. At 8 a.m, Lottie and Emily walked across Central Park to the east side. Emily was auditioning to sing at the Monkey Bar, so she had her music in a case and her high heels in a tote. They both caught the streetcar down 5th. Emily jumped off at 54th Street, while Lottie continued on to Bryant Park and then walked the 5 blocks to 2nd Avenue. Outside the newspaper offices, she stopped. She knew the next chapter of her life was about to begin, but she had mixed feelings. There was excitement, but also fear. What if she wasn't cut out for the fast-paced newspaper life?
It was still early, so Lottie stopped into Max's diner on the next block to get coffee, knowing full well it wouldn't calm her down, but it was somewhere to sit and think. Counters were good for that. You were left to your own thoughts as long as you sat away from the door. Lottie put her folder on the counter, with the article on Chester Lennox safely inside, and perched on a stool. She was near the back, where the line cooks passed over plates of eggs, bacon and home fries to the waitstaff out front.
"First day at the Manhattan Dispatch?" said a woman, taking off her hat as she sat down on the next stool and indicated Lottie's typewritten sheets. Without waiting for an answer, she turned back to the counter and yelled, "What does a reporter need to do to get a cup of coffee round here?"
Cool it, Olive, and keep taking those Nervine tablets. Coffee's coming right up. You want your usual breakfast order, too?
"Yeah, and put one on my tab for this rookie reporter right here."
You don't have a tab, Olive.
He said, pouring a large cup of coffee and pushing the pitcher of cream in her direction. Olive poured just the tiniest amount of cream into her coffee, reached into her bag, pulled out a saccharin dispenser, added 5, maybe 6 tabs into her coffee, stirred it, and took a deep gulp. "Your coffee's getting worse, Chuck," she groaned.
You can always take your custom round to one of those fancy places on Madison Avenue, Olive.
He replied, giving Lottie a top-up of coffee and grinning. Then he passed over 2 large plates of eggs and corned beef hash from the kitchen hatch. Olive squinted at her, then leaned over and grabbed her chin. "Wait," she rasped. "Aren't you the girl with Chester Lennox?" Lottie had pierced her egg over easy, and the yolk was running rivulets over the hash. She was hungry, but Olive's statement made her put down her fork. She murmured something about how she was a journalist and had been interviewing him, actually. At 2 a.m. in Harlem, Olive laughed and polished off her breakfast in record time. "Well, at least we know you're not afraid to chase down a story," she said, slapping down $2 and a handful of nickels, while slipping down from her stool. No, don't rush. You've got time. I'm leading morning conference, said Olive. Olive knocked back her coffee as if it was a shot of whiskey and dashed out of the diner. Still unsure of protocol, Lottie looked into her purse for coins to leave as a tip.
You're all right, kid. Olive got you covered. Go knock 'em dead.
Lottie stole a look at the clock over the soda fountain and realized she was about to be late on her first day. As it turned out, the guards at the Manhattan Dispatch were not thrilled about the elevation of reporters who weren't male to the Brotherhood of the Fourth Estate. Despite Lottie's pleadings that she'd be late and showing them her Lennox story notes, they kept her waiting for what felt like ages before they let her go up. In the elevator, Lottie saw her face was shiny, and her one smart navy dress with the pearl buttons and a white detachable collar was all wrong. There were very few women in the lobby, and only 2 in the elevator, but they all wore variations on a theme of tweed tailoring in the skirt-suit line with a crisp blouse. By the time the elevator reached the 11th floor, Lottie was ready to buy a ticket back to Pasadena. What had she been thinking? A few months of freelancing in the mid-market women's magazine world had not prepared her for the loud, clamoring, smoke-filled, male-heavy newsroom of the Manhattan Dispatch. No one looked up from their typewriters as she approached. In fact, several ignored her outright when she asked where Mickey Brierly sat. She could see Olive, or at least Olive's gesticulating hands, above the half-frosted door of the conference room. Mickey was probably in there, she thought, and looked around for a spare desk. Sitting there, with her precious notes in a folder resting on the corner of the table, she tried to figure out what to do next. She felt thirsty and looked around for a water cooler, but couldn't see one. If she got ignored asking for the editor-in-chief, she was sure a request for refreshment was going to be met with outright derision.
Copy,
shouted one of the reporters on the large table at the center of the room. He was holding up a sheaf of papers in his left hand, while his right cradled a phone. One of 3 he was working at the same time, barking instructions into one, listening into another, while scratching out notes on a legal pad with a chewed-down pencil. He looked like Clark Gable in one of his classic tough guy roles, worse for the wear with a vicious hangover, and still wearing the same shirt since yesterday. A young man ran over and took the sheets out of his hand.
Brierly,
said the reporter tersely, nodding over at a closed office door in the corner of the vast newsroom. Lottie stood up suddenly and almost knocked her papers and the copy boy flying.
Watch it, sister,
he said. She followed him, but the Clark Gable-esque reporter stuck out his hand rudely, almost cutting her off at the waist. She flinched.
Where do you think you're going?
He said gruffly. She looked at him from her not very great height and said nothing, mainly because she didn't trust her voice to come out right. She was so nervous, but she also knew that reporters don't wait for permission.
I said, where do you think you're going?
All she could do was point in the direction of the editor-in-chief's office, then moved quickly across the room. Careful not to bash into any of the reporters, who were all seemingly in constant motion, she finally got to the other side. Then she felt a hand on her arm and almost jumped into the air. It was the Clark Gable type again.
Listen, kid, he's not hiring stenographers right now, and definitely not somebody as fresh-faced as you.
I'm not a stenographer or a typist, she said firmly. I'm a reporter, and Mickey Brierly hired me last night.
Is that right?
He sounded unconvinced, but also intrigued. Yes, I spoke with him at Chumley's and told him about my interview with Chester Lennox.
Chester Lennox? Did you meet him at Chumley's too?
I interviewed him at his hotel after he played at the Savoy Ballroom. In Harlem, she added unnecessarily.
I know where the Savoy Ballroom is. Okay, come with me,
he said, and marched Lottie straight into Mickey Brierly's office.
Mickey Brierly looked as if he had not slept since she last saw him. His face was craggy with exhaustion. The desk was littered with coffee cups, some put into dual use as ashtrays, and 2 stenographers were typing into machines at either end of his long desk. Behind him, Lottie could see into the next building. Each floor was demarcated into offices. Some looked like insurance or ladies' milliners. Then, directly opposite, a garment sweatshop full of Chinese workers gave an unwelcome insight into how other people barely survived life in New York. "Who's this?" barked Brearley, as Lottie stood just inside the door. Lottie gingerly put her rewritten article about Chester Lennox on his desk. He stared at it. It was clear he didn't remember much about last night. He ran his fingers through his hair. Lottie could barely breathe. This was a real newspaper office, with a real newspaper editor, and she was surrounded by real reporters. At last! "You know each other?" said Mickey, finally, looking between Olive and Lottie.
"I bought the kid eggs," said Olive, frowning at her slightly. "She said you'd hired her." Mickey Brierly shifted in his seat, but said nothing. "We had a drink at Chumley's," said Lottie quickly, "and discussed my interview with Chester Lennox." Again, not strictly true, but the facts were all in the right place. They had drunk pints of bitter at the same time, at the same table, together. Her article did come up for discussion. She knew she'd made it sound as if both Olive had invited her for breakfast and Mickey asked her to join him for a drink. But she wanted to get ahead so badly that she was willing to be as ballsy as it took. A picture desk editor rushed in with a folder of black and white prints. The picture of Lottie and Chester Lennox was on top of the pile. Mickey grabbed it and looked at her, questioningly. "I was at the Savoy Ballroom with some friends who, well, I lost them as the crowd left," said Lottie quickly. "Chester took me to his hotel. He bought me breakfast and agreed to an interview." She indicated the story in Mickey's hand. Lottie wondered if her newspaper career might be over before it had begun. A bell rang at noon, and all the typing stopped. Copy was sent down to the basement where the printers made up the paper, using hot metal type and then running the presses with their huge, noisy, dangerous, roller-based machines. The next shift of journalists arrived, ready to put together the evening edition, and the morning shift all left, mostly for the bars, ostensibly for a sandwich lunch, but usually a liquid one. Brierly grabbed his hat. He looked at Lottie closely, then sighed, told her which desk to take, said he needed the edits on the Chester Lennox piece by the end of the day, then rushed out to join the reporters heading to the bar. Slowly drifting back across the newsroom, Lottie put her folder on the desk. She wanted to pinch herself. She was here. She was on assignment as a rookie reporter for the Manhattan Dispatch. But just then, her arch-nemesis, Amaryllis Michaelides, the achingly glamorous fashion writer for Mode, walked into the newsroom. Lottie couldn't believe her eyes. All the reporters looked up and stopped typing. Amaryllis smiled slowly, looking around for Mickey Brierly, not knowing he was having a liquid lunch down at Chumley's. Then she saw Lottie. Lottie didn't know whether to run, duck under a desk, or brazen it out.